Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today we're going to take a short trip off of the beaten track, and we are going to review a manga. One of the newest Shonen Jump manga to be translated into English, Kaiju number 8. Now, as this is a manga still in print, I'm going to start out with a spoiler-free section and then move on to the fully spoiler section. So, for the spoiler-free section, suffice it to say, I was positively delighted with this manga. It caught my attention first for having my favorite style of shonen manga art, and the story pulled me in from the beginning with a twist that some might consider overdone in recent years. Some might consider it such, but I don't. In fact, I was pulled along with the story so fast that even though I noted the obvious similarities to other recent manga, I simply couldn't care. This was its own story. Sure, it pulled on all the tropes that are popular in this day and age, but Kaiju number 8 is its own story. In fact, after I had that horrible experience where you reach the end of the manga's latest issue and your mental foot steps out into the void of next issue coming soon, that first stare has nothing on that sensation. I had some time to really think about what this manga was doing. It actually reminded me, oddly enough, of an old C.S. Lewis quote from his work Mere Christianity. The quote goes like this: "Even in literature and art, no man who bothers about originality will ever be original, whereas if you simply try to tell the truth without caring twopence how often it has been told before, you will, 9 times out of 10, become original without ever having noticed it. The principle runs through all life from top to bottom." Now, tell the truth might be a bit odd sounding when talking about a manga about kaiju, but that is what this story is doing, because like all manga, like all stories, the story isn't about the monsters. The monsters are just there to give the heroes something to face as they go on their own hero's journey. In Kaiju number 8, everything, or rather everyone, feels true. Of course, you do have your typical shonen archetypes to deal with: the scrappy underdog, the unbelievably competent prodigy, the heir to ability, but the first 20-odd chapters quickly round them out into fully developed characters, for the most part. It goes further than just the characters, however. The world they are in feels like it could be real, like the titular kaiju are just one more dirty problem that every city in it needs to deal with, like disposing of the accumulated trash of several million people, or facing the yearly barrage of storms that batter away any coastal city. It feels like if you walked around the corner and left the action of the main plot behind you, you could wander into a world that would be very familiar, but with just one difference: there are kaiju. Alrighty, and now for the spoilers of the spoiler section. You have been warned. Click away if you don't want to hear all the awesome juicy details. I am enjoying this manga a lot. Now, I do have a Shonen Jump subscription, which I've had for several years now, so I could theoretically read all the current manga every week and every month depending on when they're published. But that's not my style. I like to close the app and let the stories build for months on end so that I can have a good stock of reading when I came back. This time, I let my subscription sit for nearly a year. So basically, I haven't read any manga since I started this channel, which is the main reason why I haven't reviewed any manga since I started this channel. So I actually missed the debut of this new title, but discovered it when I popped back in to check on how my favorite seiyans were getting along with their never-ending training. Suffice it to say, I was delighted with what I found. Kaiju number 8 has everything that I want in a manga. There are monsters, friendship, clean art lines, and plenty of just flat-out brawling. But what, you ask, was the old C.S. Lewis quote back there for? Good question. I just want to address the Titan in the room before I go on. One of the main world-building elements for Kaiju number 8 is very, very clearly taken from Attack on Titan. If not taken directly from Attack on Titan, they both drew from the same source. Aside from the whole, monsters constantly attacking human cities shtick, our main character is a human who was infected with some of the monster stuff and can now transform into a smaller, more powerful form of the monsters while maintaining his humanity with the added ability to transform back to a human state. You would think that such an obvious overlap would make Kaiju number 8 all but a ripoff of Attack on Titans, but it manages not to be. Kaiju number 8 is in fact one of the most original shonen manga I have read in a long time. While it might share some key ingredients with almost every other manga out there, this is its own story, and not just because it's often delightfully self-aware. Remember, French toast and egg salad share key ingredients, but they're very, very different products. But What is Kaiju number 8? What kind of shonen manga is it? Well, that is a little hard to say. Despite sharing a little bit of something with nearly every other manga out there right now, it really follows none of the major patterns that most manga fall into. It isn't either high or low fantasy. 22 chapters in, there's not a hint of magic of any sort. There's no sign of any of the plethora of Japanese deities meddling in the mortal world. We haven't even seen one of those little ghost spirits that's meant to keep away the rain. Very little spirituality in this at all. The story is very science fiction. I see signs of neither Oh My Goddess nor Yu Yu Hakusho. When the giant monsters who would be crushed under their own weight roam Tokyo, it is hand-waved away with scientific mumbo-jumbo and the visual shorthand for some sort of biostatic energy fields. When our heroes exceed human capacity, it is because they are enhanced with well-developed scientific weapons that accentuate their own natural training. The humans themselves all appear to be within the natural reign of human physicality. And the tech itself is actually kind of just 5 minutes into the future. It's just out of the range of what you could conceivably go find in a military base today. Just a little too advanced to be something you'd find in our military base. But if you did actually see this kind of weaponry on a military base, it would not be impossible to believe. So that's the technology was very well researched. And the kaiju themselves are also simply a natural part of the world that people live in, with most of humanity reacting the same way you would expect people would react to a typhoon or a tsunami or a wildfire. Sure, they're terrified. Yes, they're running in fear, but it's something that they understand. And the world of Kaiju number 8. The world is a bit strange from the get-go for a few reasons. This whole situation is set either in the present day or 5 minutes in the future in a modern-day Japan. And from the look of the cityscapes and the characters, when they are in their civilian clothes, this could be a slice of life story. Like I said, it definitely has the same art style, especially of the earlier chapters of Oh My Goddess. A good percentage of the scenes take place in study halls, cafes, and shared baths, but again, kaiju might appear, giving these mundane locations a very surreal feel. Those kaiju themselves, it isn't quite clear where they came from, but we are given hints that they've been around for long enough for there to have been at least 3 generations of professional kaiju slayers, as we learn. These kaiju are accepted as part of the nature of this world and have been for generations. All told, this whole series feels the most like the firefighter dramas that have been popular for the last decade or so, which is enforced by the primary mission of the main characters. Our secondary protagonist is an up-and-coming young thing who wants to run with the top kaiju slaying crews, but our main hero, and this is where we do get a fairly unusual element, the one thing that kind of makes this stick out from a storytelling perspective. The main character is a middle-aged civil servant, and here we meet our main protagonist, Kafka. Yep, Kafka. Some of you might recognize that is not a very Japanese name, because, well, it's not. Kafka is a very bohemian name. Not in the bohemian in the sense that they were the subculture that preceded hippies, but bohemian as it came from one of the tiny Germanic states around Prague that existed before World War II. But more importantly to our story, the name itself is a spoiler, and I have to wonder if the name is the same in the untranslated Japanese. Kafka, the original, is a big enough name that it would be no stretch to imagine that the casual Japanese manga fan would recognize the name, or that it might be a subtle in for the nerdiest of the otaku to get. Be that as it may, if you know anything about classic Western horror literature, you can guess that this character is in for a metamorphosis, and not a nice one. My first thought on seeing his name tag was, well, that's funny, why'd the author name him that? Well, I wonder what's going to happen to him. Well, we pretty quickly find that out. So our beloved Kafka turns out to be part of the crews that clean up the bodies of the kaiju left over after the Japanese Defense Force takes them out. So what happens is the big honking heroes storm in with their guns and their armor and shoot the kaiju to bits, and then these hard-working civil servants show up to dismember the bodies and clean up the slimy and toxic mess left over. It turns out our protagonist has applied to be one of these heroes, but had never managed to pass the strenuous test for the application process, and has settled down to life as a civil servant and gradually let his body slack from hero firm to dad bod around. He's not out of shape exactly, but he sure ain't Adonis anymore. Then He heroically saves the new kid. New kid imprints on his senpai. New kid stirs the fires of ambitions in the old guy. Old guy decides to make one last try for a big honking hero team. Kafka is the classic underdog in this. He's just barely not good enough. He is hardworking and determined, but he has never quite had enough skill to make the big leagues. Then the curse of his name kicks in, and he is granted that extra skill just in time for the big tryouts, but at a terrible price. There are a bunch of other elements in this manga. He has the classic childhood promise, a rival who is leagues ahead of him, a hint of romance, but nothing front and center, which I'm actually quite fond of in a story, a team of battle brothers to keep him up to snuff once he's in the team, a dark and mysterious figure pulling the string behind the series, who controls the bigger bads that get ever bigger as we go on. Like I said, this is a story made of every common ingredient the manga market has to offer. But you know what else is made of dirt common ingredients? Curry, bread, and every other wholesome and delicious meal you've ever come home to. That is what this series feels like. It feels like coming home from a long day of work and stress and opening your door to the smell of your favorite meal. Then you find out that not only has someone ordered you your favorite comfort food, but they ordered it from the best restaurant and spared no expense. Every dish is meticulously prepared, and it has every side dish you love and is served in the perfect serving size. There is nothing in there that's a true surprise, and yet you love every bite of it. While I was reading this, the only distress I experienced was the haunting understanding that the story was going to end suddenly and I would have to wait, possibly a month, for the next issue. Fortunately, this is a weekly issue, so I only had to wait 5 days. Remember, okay, so there you have my review of Kaiju number 8. Definitely suggest you pick it up to read it, but remember, my own science fiction book, Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, is up on Amazon. Check out the link below for a good laugh, hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers.